A radiography of capitalism, the Gilded Scales, wealth, justice, and the capitalist paradox of impunity.
The two-tiered city of justice. Imagine two cities superimposed upon one another. The foundational promise of modern justice is blindfolded, signifying impartiality, the idea that the law applies equally to the pauper and the prince. In the first city, justice is a stark, imposing structure built of concrete and iron bars. Its paths are well trodden by the poor, the marginalized, and the desperate. The slightest misstep, a stolen loaf of bread, a minor transgression born of necessity, can lead one through its unforgiving gates, where punishment is swift, severe, and life-altering. In the second city, justice is a gilded maze of mirrored halls and silent, carpeted corridors. Here, the wealthy navigate consequences that seem to dissolve before them. Serious crimes, fraud that devastates thousands, environmental poisoning, systemic corruption are met not with handcuffs, but with legal filings, procedural delays, and psychological alibis. The most potent of these alibis is the perverse doctrine of affluenza. The notion that immense wealth can so insulate and distort an individual's mind that they cannot comprehend the moral and legal weight of their actions.
Can you recall an instance where a high-profile individual's wealth seemed to influence their legal outcome? How did that make you feel about the fairness of the system?
This is not a recognized medical condition, but a social pathology where immense wealth creates a perceived or argued insulation from consequence. It is the argument that a defendant, due to the distorting prism of extreme privilege, cannot comprehend the nature or impact of their crimes, and thus should be exempt from normal punishment. Meanwhile, for the vast majority, the legal system operates with relentless, unforgiving efficiency. This essay argues that the systematic exemption of the hyperwealthy from meaningful accountability is not a bug of capitalism, but a feature of its late, unregulated stage. It represents a profound corruption of the philosophical underpinnings of justice, delivering a devastating message about power, value, and humanity in our society. The stark dichotomy of justice, the philosophical and historical roots of legal inequity, and the corrosive message it sends to the fabric of the entire society. Question: can you recall an instance where a high-profile individual's wealth seemed to influence their legal outcome? How did that make you feel about the fairness of the system? The historical architect. How law was built to serve property. To understand the present, we must excavate the past. Modern legal systems in the capitalist West evolved not from abstract ideals of equality, but from structures designed to protect property and capital. From the enclosure acts that criminalized the traditional rights of the poor to the use of legal chicanery by robber barons, the law has often been a tool for consolidating power. The concept of the corporate veil and the development of tort law reveal a history where legal personhood and liability were carefully sculpted to protect accumulated wealth. Judges, historically drawn from the property classes, often internalized a worldview where threats to social order came from below, not from the suites of power. This created an unconscious bias, a twisted and unrealistic mindset that views the crimes of the wealthy as complex lapses or misjudgments, while the crimes of the poor are seen as moral failings or inherent threats. Question: if the law's historical DNA is coded to protect property, can it ever be truly blind? What foundational reforms would be needed to rewrite this code? The architecture of exemption, the mechanics of exemption, affluenza, and the theater of absolution, how impunity is engineered. The acquittal or negligible sentencing of wealthy criminals is rarely the result of a single corrupt judge, though that can happen. It is the product of a sophisticated, multi-layered defense architecture that money constructs. The term affluenza gained notorious traction in a 2013 case where a teenager, driving intoxicated and killing 4 people, received probation after experts argued his privileged upbringing left him unable to link actions to consequences. This legal strategy exposes a perverse logic that extreme wealth can be a mitigating factor, even in grievous harm. The mechanisms are manifold. First, there is the legal fortress. The wealthy do not merely hire a lawyer. They deploy a team of attorneys, jury consultants, forensic accountants, and public relations experts. They engage in lawfare, using procedural motions, delays, and appeals to exhaust the resources and resolve of prosecutors. The case ceases to be about guilt or innocence and becomes a war of attrition, which the state, with limited public funds, often loses. The dream team defense only them can afford. Unlimited resources procure elite legal teams that can navigate, delay, and complexify cases, overwhelming under-resourced prosecutors. Second, we see the narrative shield. This is where affluenza and its cousins reside. Defense teams construct psychological narratives that pathologize wealth. The defendant is painted as a victim of their own privilege, so coddled by nannies, so insulated by luxury, so deprived of normal human feedback that they lack the requisite mens rea, guilty mind. This argument, successfully leveraged in cases like that of Ethan Couch, the teen who killed 4 while driving drunk, is not just a legal strategy. It is a metaphysical claim. It asserts that excessive wealth can so alienate a person from common reality that they exist in a moral vacuum, beyond the reach of laws written for the comprehending poor. The sociological alibi. Expert witnesses pathologize privilege, framing the defendant as a victim of their own rarefied environment. The privatization of justice. Cases are diverted to private rehab or restorative justice programs, inaccessible to the average citizen. Third, there exists the economic bargain. Punishment is often converted into cost. Staggering fines, which are mere percentages of a billionaire's wealth, replace incarceration. Settlements are reached with no admission of guilt. The crime is monetized, and the transaction cleanses the perpetrator, while victims are silenced with confidentiality clauses. Question: is affluenza a legitimate psychological concept for defense? Or is it merely the latest legal gadget wealth can purchase to evade accountability? The calculus of sympathy. A judge, perhaps subconsciously sympathetic to a fellow elite, or wary of upending a productive life, issues a ruling that substitutes therapy for incarceration.
Is affluenza a legitimate psychological concept for defense, or is it merely the latest legal gadget wealth can purchase to evade accountability?
The philosophy of justice corrupted, from Aristotle to affluenza. The affluenza defense represents a radical perversion of millennia of philosophical thought on justice. From Aristotle, we inherited the concept of proportional justice, that punishment should be proportionate to the crime, and that equals should be treated equally. The two-tiered system shatters this principle, making the scale of consequence inverse to the scale of social power. The Enlightenment thinkers like Beccaria and Locke grounded justice in the social contract. We surrender some freedoms and agree to abide by laws for mutual protection and societal order. The wealthy fugitive, exempted by affluence, breaches this contract in the most fundamental way. They enjoy the benefits of society, its infrastructure, its stability. This creates not a citizen, but a feudal sovereign who operates within the nation's borders but outside its foundational compact. Furthermore, the too rich to understand argument insults the very notion of moral agency. Kantian ethics is built on the categorical imperative and the capacity for rational moral choice. To argue that wealth destroys this capacity is to argue that the wealthy are less than full moral persons. Society is thus presented with a grotesque choice. Either they are rational agents and should be held fully accountable, or they are morally disabled by their wealth, in which case their vast unchecked power is itself a danger that requires severe limitation for the public good. The law, paradoxically, uses the latter argument to enable the former injustice. Question: does the acceptance of the affluenza defense implicitly suggest that extreme wealth is a form of mental incompetence? And if so, what should society's response be to those deemed incapable of understanding the consequences of their power? The other scale of justice. Punitive certainty for the unshielded contrasts this with the experience of the ordinary citizen. For petty theft, minor drug possession, or driving infractions, the system operates with automated rigor. Mandatory minimums, cash bail systems, overworked public defenders, and societal prejudice converge to create a pipeline to punishment. The message is one of deterrence through severity for the poor, and rehabilitation through exemption for the rich. A single mother shoplifting formula faces a stiffer likelihood of jail time than a CEO, whose fraudulent actions evaporate thousands of pensions. This is not justice differentiated by crime but by class. Question: have you or someone you know ever felt the system was rigged against you due to a lack of resources? How does that direct experience shape trust in institutions? The message to society, the pedagogy of impunity. A justice system is not just a functional mechanism, it is a teacher. It instructs citizens on what is valued, what is tolerated, and what one can aspire to be. The lesson of gilded impunity is toxic and multifaceted. First, it teaches that wealth is ontological superiority. Money does not just buy things. It fundamentally alters one's being in the eyes of the law. It transmutes felony into civil violation, incarceration into house arrest, criminal responsibility into tragic pathology. And more fragile than the common person whose suffering is your collateral damage. Second, it erodes the legitimacy of the law itself. It fosters cynicism, nihilism, and ultimately, social unrest. Third, it codifies a moral hazard of epic proportions. If there are no meaningful consequences for dumping toxins, this directly incentivizes the large-scale sociopathic crimes that cause the greatest public harm, because the perpetrators are shielded from the very outcomes that would deter question others, but that an entirely different rulebook exists for them. The philosophical abyss, what this dichotomy teaches society. The message this system broadcasts is philosophically catastrophic. How about let's see? The erosion of the social contract. The contract that we all submit to the same rules for mutual security shatters. It reveals itself as a fiction imposed on the many, and optional for the few. The moral hazard of capital. It teaches that wealth is not just a means of comfort, but a literal get-out-of-jail-free card. This incentivizes not innovation or prudence but audacity without fear. The cynicism of the citizenry. When people see the law as a malleable tool for the powerful, respect for the law disintegrates. This breeds apathy, rage, and potentially extra-legal retaliation. The definition of crime itself. It subtly redefines crime. An action is not wrong because it causes harm, but because the wrong kind of person committed it. The crime of the wealthy is often administratively sanitized into a violation or a settled matter. Question: can a society remain stable and cohesive when its citizens believe the core principle of equal justice is a lie? What are the long-term societal consequences of such deep-seated cynicism? The correct and the fair, reimagining equality before the law. The correct path is not the destruction of wealth, but the unyielding democratization of accountability. The fair system is one where consequence is tied to harm, not to status. 1. Abolish the affluenza doctrine. It must be explicitly rejected in courtrooms as the insult to justice and reason that it is. Wealth and privilege are aggravating factors, not mitigating ones. They provide greater resources to know the law, to avoid harm, and to act ethically. 2. Restore proportional punishment. Sentencing must consider the scale of harm. A CEO whose decision leads to hundreds of deaths should face consequences commensurate with that collective harm, not a fine. Corporate personhood must be matched with corporate incarceration, the debarment from industry, the dissolution of entities that are repeat offenders. 3. Attack the legal fortress. Public financing for prosecuting complex, white-collar crimes must be dramatically increased. Implement loser-pays models in criminal cases for the ultra-wealthy to deter frivolous delay tactics. Limit the ability to seal records and hide behind settlements. 4. Shift the burden of proof in civil law. For crimes of extreme power asymmetry, like financial fraud against thousands of depositors, the burden could shift to the defendant to prove their actions were not negligent or malicious. 5. Cultivate a culture of moral responsibility. This is a philosophical and educational project. We must revive the idea that with great wealth comes great responsibility, not great exemption. Philanthropy cannot be a write-off for predation. Storming the gilded maze, the spectacle of the wealthy fugitive, acquitted not by evidence of innocence but by evidence of excess, is the defining moral crisis of our capitalist epoch. It reveals a system that has confused price with value, cost with consequence, and wealth with wisdom. The message is one of profound dehumanization. It dehumanizes the poor by punishing their humanity too harshly, and dehumanizes the rich by pretending they have none to judge. This cannot stand. The gilded maze must be stormed not with violence, but with an unwavering collective will for justice. Therefore, let this be a call to action. To the citizens, become relentless spectators of the powerful. Support investigative journalism. Serve on juries with courage, rejecting pathological defenses of privilege. Vote locally and nationally for prosecutors and judges committed to equity. Organize, protest, and demand that your state bar associations sanction lawyers who peddle the affluenza myth. To the legal professionals, those of you with a conscience must fight from within. Refuse to build the legal fortresses. Become prosecutors who target power. Become judges who pronounce, from the bench, that wealth is not a disability and privilege is not an excuse. Write the dissenting opinions that will become the law of tomorrow. To the philosophers and educators, teach this, analyze this. Name this corruption for what it is. Arm the next generation with the ethical frameworks to dismantle it. Reignite the language of the social contract, of civic virtue, and of universal moral worth. To the society as a whole, we must make a collective decision. Will we be a society of laws or a society of owners and owned? Will we allow the logic of the market to completely colonize the temple of justice? The gilded scales are tipping, and with them, the very possibility of a common life. The time for outrage is past. The time for organized, intelligent, and unyielding reconstruction is now. Let us build a third city, one not of concrete cages or gilded mazes, but of transparent halls, where the scale of justice is blind, weighted only by the gravity of the act, and held firmly in the hand of the people. The need for recalibration toward a justice that binds all. They need to be forced to look in the mirror and fulfill their promise. Justice must be recalibrated to weigh the scale of harm, not the identity of the harmer. We must move from outrage to orchestrated, relentless demand. Abolish the legal tools of impunity. End cash bail. Fund public defender offices to parity with prosecutors. Severely restrict the use of wealth-based psychological defenses like affluenza. Implement magnitude of harm sentencing guidelines for corporate and financial crimes that mandate consequences proportional to the social damage done. Pursue the architects, not just the foot soldiers. Legislative and prosecutorial focus must shift upward. The man who steals a wallet goes to jail. The executive who designs a scheme to steal 10,000 wallets through fraud must face penalties in order of magnitude greater. Pierce the corporate veil with personal liability. Demand judicial accountability and diversity. Support judicial selection processes that prioritize diverse professional and socioeconomic backgrounds. Establish robust, transparent oversight bodies to review sentencing disparities. Illuminate and educate. As citizens, we must be investigative reporters of our own justice systems. Attend court proceedings. Document disparities. Support journalism that tracks wealth and power. Use every platform to name the contradiction and shame the exemption. Reframe the narrative. We must stop saying a wealthy defendant lost everything after a fine that is a fraction of their wealth. We must collectively affirm, justice is not a luxury good. A system that punishes poverty and excuses wealth is not just flawed. It is corrupt in its very soul. The message for society is this: we are building our future in the courtroom today. Will it be a future where the law is a wall protecting the powerful, or a foundation upon which a truly common and therefore just society can be built? The gavel is in our hands. Let our verdict be for equality, and let our sentence be reform. Let us not rest until the blindfold is restored, not as a cover for the eyes, but as a guarantee for them, ensuring that the scales balance not the weight of a wallet, but the weight of the wrong.
Please tell me what you think and how you feel about this issue. Analyze it, brainstorm it, debate it, and if you like it, please share it. Thank you for watching. I truly and highly appreciate you, and God bless you.